Good evening and welcome to the Marin Interfaith Council's Getting to Know Your Neighbor's Faith, Ask Me Anything. And tonight we have Rabbi Paul Steinberg here with us, and I will read a little bit about him in a second. But before I begin that, I will just remind you that if you enjoy evenings such as this and would like to make a donation, you are welcome to do so on our website, marinifc.org. And this is one of our Wednesday evenings. We have the first 3 Wednesdays of each month, we have something happening. The first Wednesday of the month, we have Release into Peace, which is a meditation with Annie Jorgensen, who is from the Brahma Kumari's faith. And then the second Wednesday of the month, we have a monthly meditation, which is, both of those are online only, and you can find them on our website. Next month, our meditation will be led by the Reverend Scott Clark. And next month for our Getting to Know Your Neighbor's Faith, Ask Me Anything, we will have Moina Shaikh, who is a Muslim woman from Fremont, my hometown. So she will be with us next month. So if you have questions after, Rabbi Paul will talk for a little bit, and then we'll open it up to questions. Anyone here can raise your hand, and I can't see real well, but just wave it and I will see it. If you are online, you can type the questions in the chat and Scott will read them out to us. So let me introduce to you Rabbi Paul Steinberg. Rabbi Paul is the senior rabbi at Congregation Kol Shofar in Tiburon. He is a National Jewish Book Award-winning author of 6 books, including his most recent book, Spiritual Growth, A Contemporary Jewish Approach, which won the New Mexico Arizona Book Award in the category of spirituality. So with that little brief introduction, I will let you speak for yourself, and please open however you'd like.
Thank you. First of all, I start with gratitude. A lot of gratitude for you and for facilitating this, and for the Marin Interfaith Council, which I'm so glad to be a part of and support the work of. And I happen to have great affection for the executive director, Reverend Scott Quinn, who is manning the Zoom at this time. And I'm so grateful for the people that came here in person on this rainy night in San Rafael. Thank you so much for showing up and being supportive of this. It's a tremendous opportunity. I'm humbled to have to explain Judaism in just I get 15 minutes. 15. I'm looking at your questions here. There is a story in the Talmud about somebody who was interested in becoming Jewish and converting. And he goes to the rabbi and says, explain to me Judaism while I stand on one foot. And that becomes a paradigm. It becomes a sort of iconic moment and statement of doing it on one foot. So that's what we're doing. All right. Well, we'll have some fun, hopefully, people online. Your questions. History of my faith. How did I get into it? Well, I guess the first thing to understand is that there are different Judaisms. And these Judaisms are not arbitrary, and they are not, some are more Jewish than others. There's the real Jews, who are sometimes the ultra-Orthodox or the Orthodox. You can stereotypically imagine them in your head, and everybody else is some sort of Jewish light. That's not actually how it works. These are deep philosophical differences. And I grew up with parents that raised me in what's called Reform Judaism, which is very much informed by the Enlightenment and trying to align Judaism with modernity. And so I grew up in a Reform. I went to Hebrew school, and then I was kicked out of Hebrew school constantly. And then because if it didn't involve a ball and running and competing, I was not interested as an elementary school student. And so then my parents got the idea that they should send me to get a real Jewish education. And they had heard about a particular school, a day school, which you call a private Jewish day school, that was run under the auspices of the ultra-Orthodox, a different stream of Judaism, which you may have heard of because they're quite popular and they're quite vocal, which is called Chabad, which is a Lubavitcher ultra-Orthodox Hasidic sect. And so I went to ultra-Orthodox day school, Chabad day school, for several years. And then I had my bar mitzvah, but I didn't have it in either Reform or Chabad. I had it in what is known as the conservative movement, a different stream of Judaism altogether. And then after I had my bar mitzvah, I did what a lot of people do, which is I dropped out. And I became what is known in the Jewish world as a twice-a-year Jew. What's a twice-a-year Jew? Is a fall and spring Jew. A Jew that attends what's known as the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, maybe you've heard of him, important Jewish holidays. Okay, so you go to synagogue, you make your annual pilgrimage to the synagogue on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, you check in, and then you have the most popular Jewish ritual, which is the Passover Seder. The Passover ritual meal commemorating the Exodus from Egypt. There's a book you read, the whole thing. That's what I did for many years. And then I went to college. I'm from Arizona, I should say. I'm from Tucson, Arizona. And I had what some might call a mid-college crisis, where all of a sudden I had an existential crisis in the middle of college. Like, why am I doing this? Why am I studying hard? I had to study hard in college. Why should I care? What make money? For what? To get a house? To buy a car? There are a lot of people that have money and houses and cars, etc., and they're still miserable. It didn't seem to me that that was the solution to life's existential issues. I was 21 at the time. Why this happened, I don't know, but that's what happened to me. And so I dropped out of college. I withdrew. The problem with withdrawing from college, University of Arizona at that time, was that like I needed help financially. I needed my parents' support. My parents were recently touched by yet another Jewish stream called the Renewal Stream. Popular rabbi, actually in the Bay Area, in case somebody's following, is Zalman Schachter Shalomi. A renewal Judaism. My parents were touched by him and his movement. And they said, well, you know, you need our money. You're going to drop out of school. Then you have to go to Israel. It's fine. I didn't care. You could send me to Taiwan. It wouldn't matter to me. I just knew that I wanted to be out and be away. And so I went to Israel and I lived on a kibbutz, which is like a commune within the state of Israel, a self-contained commune. And my life changed. This was 94, 95 at the time, for historical reference. And I don't know if it was Israel, but it was the kibbutz for sure that changed me, the simplistic communal lifestyle. I did manual labor, serious manual labor. I worked, and this is kind of a fun irony, I suppose. I don't know what the right word, maybe irony. I worked in a meat factory. This kibbutz happened to be a very secular kibbutz, like not religious. You think about Jews, Israel. The kibbutz actually made a lot of money making pork. And so I worked in the meat factory and I made hams. While I was doing a Hebrew intensive, while I was volunteering, I worked in the ham department. And I have to say, like the meat factory made hamburgers and sausages, and also if you were in hams, you were like in the top, you were in the top floor. I worked my way up to hams. And so I had a little stamp on my meat factory uniform jacket, said making bacon. And so I was making hams, and then I would go to the Hebrew class, and I had a lot of free time, and I was reading a lot of books. I was trying to figure out myself, my life, and I was looking at these kibbutzniks. And the drive to live and survive surrounded by enemies. I was there the year that Yitzhak Rabin, the prime minister, was assassinated by an ultra-Orthodox Jew within the state of Israel. That led me to question. And I was reading all sorts of books on everything I could get my hands on, particularly spirituality. I mean, I was just a searcher, I guess. I was reading on Buddhism, the Jewel and the Lotus. I was reading on shamanism, Don Juan and the Journey to Ixtlan. I was reading on voodoo. I was reading on all sorts of things. And I was kind of becoming spiritual. And I came back to the United States and I went back to my hometown school, University of Arizona. And I was a psych major because what else do you pursue if you're floundering? And so I was a psych major and I got into Jewish studies. There happened to be a great scholar of biblical archaeology at the University of Arizona, at the University of Arizona at the time, named Bill Deaver. And so the Jewish Studies department was actually pretty good. And I got into Judaism through biblical archaeology, through the land, through the history, the historical lens, through a critical lens. I now studied Hebrew. I could speak Hebrew. And then when I finished, I was sort of like, what do I do with myself now? Well, I had a passion for learning this stuff, and I had a passion for teaching. I thought, well, I'm going to become a teacher. And I learned about a program at what was then called the University of Judaism. The former dean is sitting in the audience right now, of the Graduate School of Education. And I thought, well, I can get my master's degree in education, and I can do a side bachelor's in what was called Hebrew literature. And so I could sort of satiate that spiritual thing and my Hebrew thing while becoming a teacher. And then while I was in the university doing that, I met a philosopher rabbi named Elliot Dorff, who is one of those people who did his doctorate, his PhD in philosophy while he was in rabbinical school, one of those kinds of people. And he said, why don't you become a rabbi? You want to be a teacher? What do you think a rabbi is? A rabbi is a teacher after all, which is a great sucker move, to pull on a young kid who doesn't know what they want to be. And so I said, okay. And so I went into rabbinical school. And when I came into rabbinical school, I just knew that I never wanted to work in a synagogue. I wanted to be on the pulpit. I wanted to be in education. And lo and behold, 20 years later, here I am on the pulpit. And that is my spiritual journey, which is really one about a passion for learning and teaching. Your next question was, what are the core beliefs and principles of your faith? I think for Jews, most Jews, it's pretty simple. It's 3 pillars. We'd call Torah, Avodah, Gemilut Chasadim. Every synagogue's mission statement in the entire country will have some version of Torah, Avodah, which means service. It means service of the heart. Prayer, acts of loving kindness. The faith, and I'll talk about this in a second, really the determination, the trust, the foundation is based upon principles of the intellect, the mind, which is the study of Torah. And when I'm talking about Torah, I'm not talking about the 5 books of Moses, nor am I talking about the 39 books of the Hebrew Bible. I'm talking about the garden around all of that, the commentary, rabbinic literature, which is expansive to this day, continues to expand. Study, that is a spiritual area of connection, is a spiritual area of growth. To spark the intellect, that is a foundational ethic and practice and principle of Jewish faith, Judaism. Then you have the service of the heart. You have the mind, the heart, prayer. Prayer, which is not prayer in the English sense, which is begging. Prayer is also gratitude, thanks. It's also saying you're sorry. It's asking for forgiveness, it's repentance. Having a sense of heart, having a sense that I have an emotional life that is connected to my intellect, but that is also connected to every other human being. Our emotions are critically important in the world and how we understand what it is what we're supposed to be doing. How we should act compassionately, which is an effort of the heart. So you have Torah, you have mind, you have heart. So there's the heart. And then you have action. Heart, head, hand. Action. Acts of loving kindness. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to serve others? How are you going to be out of your own self-absorption and contribute as a partner, and this is a Jewish tenet, to be a partner with God? You're not waiting for things to happen. You have to take your conscience and you have to enact it in the world. And sometimes you don't feel like it. Sometimes the heart is not what moves you. Sometimes you use the hand for the sake of the hand. You have to give even when you don't feel like giving. You have to show up even when you don't feel like showing up. That is the tenet of gimilut chasadim, of acts of loving kindness, to act lovingly, to act lovingly. So it's head, the study, intellectual pursuit, heart, passionate pursuit, connection, vulnerability, speaking what you feel, and also acting on it. You just cut me off, by the way, because, I'm a rabbi, you pull a string and I'll just keep going. What practices and main holy days of your faith? I'm going to keep this short and say the central Jewish spiritual holiday, and maybe even the central Jewish spiritual practice, is the Sabbath. It happens every single week. It starts on Friday night for Jews because days start at night and just like to keep you on your toes. Days start at night, Friday nights, and end Saturday night. It is our Sabbath. And it is our moment of pause. It is our moment of self-reflection. It is a moment to let the world be as it should be. And where we connect in community, in joy, and in rest. And we express that through prayer and through learning and through celebration. That may be. Our week is not Monday to Friday, where the end is Saturday. Our week really starts somewhere in the middle, and Saturday, Friday night is the middle of the week. The week circles around Shabbat. Everything we think and we do is, how are we going to make Shabbat happen this week? And you got to start planning like on Sunday already. You're already planning for the next Shabbat, the next Sabbath. How am I going to be with community this next Saturday? How am I going to have a dinner Friday night for friends, or who am I going to show up with? That becomes the center of our weekly and frankly annual life. I already talked about the high holidays and Passover, so I can leave that. What are some misconceptions about your faith, or things people might understand? Lynn, come on. Let me count the ways. I could go many ways with this, especially now. I'll say the biggest misconception is that Judaism is a faith. It's not a faith. I don't even think it's a religion. Did you know that the Hebrew language was not a spoken language until like 1920, like the 20th century? Eliezer ben Yehuda, there's a trivia name for you. Eliezer ben Yehuda revived the Hebrew language and made it a spoken language. Jews have not spoken Hebrew, I don't know if ever, but certainly for thousands of years. Even in the time of Jesus, Jews did not speak Hebrew on the streets. Hebrew was Lashon Kodesh. It was holy tongue. It was only for the Bible. You only read it. In Jesus' time, they spoke Aramaic, which the technical term, is a bastardized form of Hebrew. Jews spoke Yiddish, which is a concoction of Polish and German and other Germanic and Eastern European languages. Jews spoke Ladino. Jews spoke Hebrew-Arabic. Jews didn't speak Hebrew. Well, during that entire 1800 years of diaspora of the Jewish people, there was no Hebrew word for religion. There's no Hebrew word for religion. The word for religion in Hebrew is made up in the 20th century by Eliezer ben dat. If you know Hebrew, dalid tav, not dad, knowing. It's a. If you were a Jew prior to Eliezer ben Yehuda, you wouldn't say you were a religion. You wouldn't say you were a faith, because what you believe is actually a little less important than what you do. Faith and religion are transposed concepts onto this ancient system of spiritual practice, of communal connection, of familial responsibility, of a covenant. And that's what you would say. I have a covenant of Torah to the Jewish people. I have been dispersed throughout the world because of the sins of my people. And one day, God willing, we will return to the Holy Land and be reconnected together. That's what you would say. I'm a person of Torah. Faith, huh? I have trust that there's something bigger than me. But, do you know what it is? I don't know exactly what it is, but I know there's something. All right, I think I answered all your questions.
That was just a starter. So if you have any questions online, you can put them in the chat and Scott will read them off. You said something that intrigued me. So, well, more than just one thing, but so what is this language in Israel that's spoken? What is the main, is it Hebrew?
Yes.
So it was created in 1920?
Yeah,
is
in the
that what you said?
1920s.
And
Yeah,
then-
Eliezer ben Yehuda.
And now it's become the language.
It is the national language of the state of Israel. It is a particularly, there's different Hebrews that emerged, different pronunciations due to dialects and geographic discrepancies. It's what we call Sephardic or Spanish Hebrew that's spoken there. And it is spoken not just by Jews, excuse me, it is also spoken by Arab Israeli Palestinians who live within the state of Israel. It is spoken by Christian Israelis as well. If you go to a church in Israel and your tour guide drives you by, you can ask your tour guide, what language do they speak in that church? And they will say Hebrew. They pray in Hebrew.
Another question, and then we can open it up. I get the pleasure of always opening with my questions. Israel is a nation. Do you have to be Jewish to be a part of that nation?
That's a great question. See, it's good that you start off with the questions. You start off with those. Israel is a nation state among the family of nations. There is the state of Israel, which was established in 1948. There is that. There is the land. There is a piece of real estate that we can point to. Not an easy place to be these days or ever, but that is the state of Israel. Then there is something called the people Israel. The people, what we might refer to as peoplehood. The people of Israel are not rooted in a particular land or a place, but we are descendants within a particular family that has been dispersed throughout the whole world, have spoken almost every language of the world, have published almost language of the world. And we have assimilated in various different cultures or not assimilated, depending upon the governing powers that be. So I am not a resident of the state of Israel. I'm not an Israeli. I am not under the auspices of the government of the state of Israel, but I am part of the people Israel. And I have an invested stake in not only the state of Israel, but in the people Israel. I have a shared history with what the people of Israel have gone through for thousands of years. Their stories are my story. I share the story, the common story of the people of Israel. And not only that, but I am entwined and embedded in the destiny of the people Israel. And I'm committed to that. It is much bigger than me. Yes, the state of Israel, the land of Israel, the governing, formal state of Israel, I have an invested stake in. I can be critical of the state of Israel as a government, but as a people, I share not only the history, but also the destiny. It's a part of who I am. It's bigger than me. And if I trust in anything, and if I have faith in anything, it is that. I give myself over to that.
It's beautiful. So I'm assuming that anyone who is a member of the state of Israel is Jewish?
No.
No.
The state of Israel is a governing country. There are Christians, there are Muslims, there are Druze.
Okay.
There are people that are immigrants from Thailand and from all over the place that have different religions, and someone that lives within the state of Israel, just like America.
Mm-hmm.
Just like America, have different people of different religions. But the people Israel is a historic and also connected by virtue of the spiritual tradition of Israel. So, for example, if somebody chooses to become Jewish, what in common parlance is called a convert, converts to Israel, you become, through the process of conversion, a part of the people Israel by your declaration and the action and ritual that you engage in, you've now are equal status of any other Jew, and are part of the people Israel. You don't have to be living in Israel for that. I hope I'm clear.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Well, I'm going to go one more, just because my husband's family, like I was saying, my mother-in-law, her grandmother was Russian Jew, who Ashkenazi. She gave me a text telling me exactly what it was. Thank you, Leslie. So she's Jewish, even though she wasn't raised practicing Judaism, because she's a part of the people.
Yeah. So it's a challenge. Not only, it's a great question. It's a challenge not only for non-Jews to understand this. It's also a challenge for Jews to understand this. So Judaism, and this is why the term faith or religion doesn't exactly work. There is a biological component to being Jewish.
Mm-hmm.
The shorthand of this is that if your mother is Jewish, you're Jewish. Okay, so there's a biological component, there is a cultural, ethnic component, and there's a spiritual component. So simply put, if your mother is Jewish, you are Jewish. But let's say that you're born to your mother and you don't practice Judaism. And in fact, you specifically choose to be Presbyterian. And you've been practicing as a Presbyterian for 25 years. Are you Jewish anymore? There is a biological component. You are technically Jewish. You're not deemed as sort of like a great sort of principled Jew. You know, you're not going to be put on like the example of how a Jew should behave, because a Jew is somebody that practices the traditional Jewish spiritual practices. So there is a category under Jewish law for such a case. And in such a case, that person would have to reconvert back into Judaism. But are they somewhat still Jewish? Yes, technically they are.
Well, yeah, if you do 23andMe.
Yeah, there's Jewish in you. But in order to have, so the question is, does that person have the rights and benefits and privileges of everybody else in the Jewish community? And the answer is no. You're not going to become the rabbi, right? Unless you undergo a process of transformation. You're not going to be the cantor. You're not going to necessarily be invited to be the synagogue president until you re-engage and reaffirm the tenets and principles of the Jewish spiritual tradition. And that's what makes it complicated. It's biological, it's ethnic, it's cultural, and it also has a religious component.
Thank you. I could go on forever, but I don't want to. I don't want to monopolize the time. So if there's anyone here who has a question, or if there's anyone online, feel free.
We have an online question. Please speak to the concept of whether Jews and Christians share the same God.
Interesting.
Want a cup of coffee?
Well, I mean, the first thing I would say is that God is not Jewish. God created the world. You know, and there were people in the Torah who were not Jewish. Adam is not a Jew. Eve is not a Jew. Noah is not a Jew. And there's generations and generations who are not Jews. God does not put on a yarmulke or a talis and light tefillin and daven my prayer book. God is the God of all humanity. And that's the only kind of God that's big enough for me to serve. A God that embraces all of humanity and loves all of humanity and all its diversity. I personally believe that it is that the God of the Christians, the God of the Muslims, the God to whom we all ultimately aspire and seek, the biggest God, and I need a big God that can hold all of us. I believe it's the same God. I do believe that God, in the language we are confined by language. We're confined by our minds. We're confined by levels of interpretation and metaphor and analogy and simile. And therefore, that great big God is going to be distilled, discerned, and discussed and described in all sorts of different ways. And I think that's a beautiful thing. I think God wants beautiful diversity. We learned that from the story of the Tower of Babel, right? And so I do believe it's the same God ultimately. I don't know. I mean, for me as a Jew, and I say this, with humility, for me, God can't be a human being. I don't know exactly. I heard all sorts of different Christian interpretations around how you square that, or how you square that round hole, whatever it is. I think there's a lot of ways to make that work, and I hear different things about it. And so I need my tradition. It works for me because it uses the language, the descriptions, the discernment that I need it to do for me. But at the end of the day, I must believe, and I do believe that it's the same one energy and presence that was there at the start of the universe and will be there at the end.
Amen. Cynthia.
As a Presbyterian pastor, I just want to say amen and thank you for the way you articulated certainly what I believe about God and how we together are experiencing this gift and presence of love in the world. What's one hope you would have in these difficult days for Jews and Muslims and Christians? Maybe I'll just say in the Bay Area. What do you think, what kind of conversation could or should we be having in light of the violence?
Thank you. And thank you for hosting this. Thank you for your question. I think that we live in a society, in a world, frankly, that, and this is not a new thing, I think this has been growing for decades and decades, that has been living in fear. And when you live in fear, you retract to a place of comfort where you can feel a sense of control, like you have it figured out, despite the fact that the world is out of our control, despite the fact that the world is very much in chaos. And when you retract in fear, it is very easy to cause blame to others, to objectify them, because that gives you a sense of, well, I have order in my life because the world is this disorder. They're the bad guys. They're the good guys. They fit into my narrative as to way the things that should work in the world. And so we get into a knee-jerk reactive rather than a responsive modality. And that's the world of the material. That's the world where you can see it. But that's not the real war. The real war is a spiritual war, where it's a war of getting out of that modality of the other, of us versus them, of Republican versus Democrat, of men versus women, of secular versus religious, of Muslim versus Jew, of Arab versus Jew. And understand that there's a greater principle at stake, which is peace and justice. And so it is so easy. And people did it so fast. As soon as October 7th happened, people were already responding, already taking sides. Before anything happened, before there was any, already trying to fit things into a narrative. And I think that we've lost our ability to listen. We've lost, hopefully not for good, but our understanding that friendship and that seeing another human being eye to eye, listening to them, being able to understand their circumstance, being able to recognize what it is that we're all pursuing, rather than entrenching ourselves in tribalism, which leads to ignorance, which leads to denial. My hope is that we can get out of that. My hope is that we can open our hearts and open our minds and to get out of our narratives of how we think the world should work, and just be able to see that there's another human being there. B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. Every human being is in the image of God. That is that's the first thing in the Torah. And that's not Jewish. You know? And so there are people that benefit from that tribalism and division. The media is right there among them. I don't know if that answered your question, but
Yes.
I tried.
Thank you.
Another question from online. Could you speak to the differences between some of the different streams of Judaism, conservative, reform?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I have my way of sort of doing this. I taught you that thing on one foot. I'm going to use it over and over. Now you got the concept, you got the
Depends on how
language,
much
you
you're
got the
working
idea.
out.
So on one foot, the question of the difference between Orthodox, conservative, reform, reconstruction, renewal, all the different streams of Judaism, like I said, it's not like there's Judaism light, and like, I don't know, Michelob light, whatever. That's not how it works, okay? These are serious philosophical disagreements, and the question boils down to, in terms of Judaism, I have no idea, I can't parallel it with Protestantism or the different streams there, but the ultimate question comes down, who is the authority? Is this water kosher? Water's generally kosher. Is it kosher? Is it accept? Who can give you the answer as to what is authoritatively Jewish? That's the difference. So you have one, and I'm going to use broad generalizations, but they're but they can work for this, which is that who's the authority? Who can tell you what's kosher? You can think for yourself. Where would you go to ask the question? What does Judaism say? You can't go to the Torah. You can't go to the Bible. If you only know the Torah and the Hebrew Bible, you know nothing about Judaism. Jews don't take the Bible literally. We follow the rabbinic tradition. Everything that you see, the accoutrement, the holiday celebrations that are Jewish are from the rabbis. There is no Rosh Hashanah in the Bible. The Passover Seder doesn't exist in the Bible. These are the creation of rabbis over centuries. So who do you go to? You can't just look it up in the Torah. Do genetic, I don't know, if you create a liver out of stem cells, or let's say you create a pig out of stem cells, or, a pork chop, is it kosher? Well, you can't look that up in the Torah. So who do you go to? One answer would be you go to the rabbi. The rabbi is the authority. And usually in this case, it's a he knows, he is the stream of tradition, and he is the scholar. That is Orthodox. The rabbi is the authority. The rabbi knows what's what. The difference between the Orthodox sects, and there's many differences, is which rabbi do you follow? And I know people who rabbi shop to find the rabbi that they're going to like. So then, okay, if it's not the rabbi who's the authority who you ask, well, then who is it? Who on earth could it be that could tell me what Judaism stands for? Say, well, it's me. I have a connection to God. I am a child of God. I'm in the divine image. And if I learn, if I study, not just the Torah as we have established, rabbinic literature and so on, be very educated, I can make decisions for myself using my own conscience, and it's between me and God. It's a personal reflection. I think pepperoni pizza is kosher because it's not the same thing. It's not, boiling a kid in its mother's milk. It's not that. I have references. I have resources. I can eat a pepperoni pizza. It's fine by me. It's kosher. And that's okay. That is reform between you and God. I'm a conservative rabbi. I'm biased. I understand that most Jews, particularly in America, are reformed, meaning they go by their own conscience. My problem is they're not as educated as they may need to be in order to make those decisions in a conscientious way, at least not to my standard. So I'm conservative. So who's left? If it's not the rabbi, if it's not the individual, are you following me, Lynn? By the
I'm
way?
following.
Okay. If it's not the rabbi, if it's not the individual, then who is it? Well, the conservative movement, again, I'm biased, points the authority in three different places. In the rabbi, yeah, the rabbi has a say. She does know something, has something to say about it. The individual self, of course, the individual self. Each of you matter. Your opinion matters. Your experience matters. We're not going to just dismiss you, but you should be in conversation with others, not just you and you alone. And the community. The community at the end of the day is the standard bearer for what it is that we should expect of Judaism, to make sure that we are all saying the same blessings, to make sure that we're celebrating the holidays the same way. And the community is the ultimate arbiter vis-a-vis the rabbi who teaches it to the community. But the community gets to decide whether by majority opinion, minority opinion, where the community wants to stand. And obviously each individual has a voice. Those are the differences. Where do you put the authority? You put it in the rabbi, you put it in the individual self, or do you put it in a collective?
All right, we have a three-legged stool in the Episcopal Church: tradition, scripture, and reason. So that's kind of our foundation.
Oh, okay.
But I'm one of those, there's so many Protestant churches. Anyways, let's keep talking about Judaism. Are there any more questions on this?
There are, but I wanted to ask a follow-up question. Could you tell us a little bit more, for those who are not familiar with the rabbinic tradition that surrounds the Torah? What is it? What does it include?
That's great. So a little history. If you want to understand the most important date, if you're a date wonk and you're a history wonk, you want to know the most important date in all of Judaism. The date is 70 CE of the Common Era. Jews use CE, not AD. And so 70 CE, which was the destruction of the Second Temple in the land of Israel by the Roman Empire, after revolts of the Jews and so on and so forth. At that time, prior to the destruction of the Second Temple, the centralization of Jewish life was around Jerusalem and the Holy Temple. And it wasn't just the Holy Temple, which was a sacrificial cult. That's where prayer happened in sacrifices at the temple. It was also the Sanhedrin, which is the Jewish court of law, which would adjudicate civil cases. It was also the marketplace down below the temple. That's where things would happen. Everything was centralized around Jerusalem. And when that temple was destroyed, made of limestone, you light it on fire, you know what happens to limestone? It explodes. It literally exploded. What happened is that the Jews had a choice. And there was a rabbi who had a choice, who smuggled out of in a coffin by his students as if he was dead. And he came back to the new ruler. You got a chance. Once the war was over and they won, you got a chance to ask the Roman emperor for anything. And he asked, what did he ask for? Could ask for anything. He could have asked to rebuild the temple, but he didn't. He said, give me Yavne and your scholars. Give me this small town in the north of Israel, and I want to teach Judaism. That's the point in Jewish history of which Judaism was born. I should say reborn. And it became a tradition that was not centralized around a particular sacrificial cult, sacrifices in the temple, but a literary tradition that was mobile, that was teachable, and that moved into the realm of the intellectual inquiry and acts of loving kindness, not just what you pay at the temple in terms of your sacrifice. And that then spawned a new literature, which would record the rabbi's teachings. They would memorize it. They would write it down. It was an accompaniment to understanding how to interpret the Torah in practice in our time, given that there was no more temple and sacrificial cult, given that there was no more Jewish court of law, which would adjudicate civil cases. How do we put this into practice wherever we are? And then that piece of literature, which is called the Mishnah, which means the teaching, was then commented upon in a later generation, and then a later generation, and then another layer. To this day, layer upon layer of trying to understand the Torah, how to understand this piece of literature that is so ancient and flawed to our modern system. How do the ethics and standards that form the foundation of it apply to us today? And that's the work. That's the spiritual work.
More questions?
Yeah.
I know there's Jews in the room. Am I checking out all right? Do I get a thumbs up?
You have to tell them the joke. Two Jews.
Oh my Sally, I don't know
Two
which.
Jews, three opinions.
Two Jews, three opinions. Thank you. Two Jews, three opinions. Two Jews, 100 opinions.
Keep
Next-
going.
Next
Yeah.
one, what are some of the contemplative spiritual practices you find meaningful? And what books or authors have you been most deeply influenced by?
Oh my gosh, that's such a beautiful question. Sorry to pause for a second. Spiritual contemplative practices. This is a new concept for Jews. Jews are still accommodating those terms. You could ask somebody, you could have asked me 25 years ago, what's Jewish spirituality? I would have been like, well, just following Jewish law. Judaism has a legal approach. You keep Shabbat and you keep it this way. You keep the holidays. You pray 3 times a day, and these are the prayers that you say. And there has been a reawakening, particularly through Jewish mysticism in the post-Holocaust world, as those teachings and practices have been further published, that there is a wellspring of Jewish mystical and spiritual practices. I think many of us, are still accommodating to that. I think we are integrating many of the practices of Buddhism in terms specifically around meditation and making them Jewish. And there has been a wellspring of Jewish creativity around how to integrate what we see is working in the world around us, and how yet at the same time they can integrate our Jewish language, our Jewish sensibilities, and our Jewish ethics. And so I find deep meaning in the simple stuff. Gratitudes. Judaism begins, the first prayer in the morning when you get up in the morning is, it says, thank you, God, that I can stand before you and that you have returned my spirit to me so that I can be in the world today. And then you recite a list of 10 or so blessings, but really it's a gratitude list. Thank you that I can stand up. Thank you that I can open my eyes. Thank you that my brain works. Thank you that I have dignity. Thank you that I am that I am in the world as I am, whether it's a man or woman or whatever, however you identify. Thank you that I'm Jewish. Thank you for the clothes that are on my body, the things that you take for granted. I think that is a deep piece of wisdom. Thank you for making me a part of a community. To me, the beginning and ending of all spiritual practice is gratitude. And that you should, when you lie down at your head at night, you should remember those same gratitudes. And I think that Shabbat, the Sabbath, however simple it sounds, having a day off per week, that you leave your circumstances and conditions at the door, that you have a sense of recreation, and I love this word, recreation, that you have something to look forward to, that you just enjoy life and rest. How deeply do we all need that? And I will say that Jews get credit for that. We created the weekend. We gave y'all a Sabbath. That comes from us. The idea of that. Like what, we're on our phones all the time. Like, let go. Can you let go? Can you let go of work? Can you let go of your esteem? Can you let go of your continual need to have your voice in the world or have the world speak to you? Can you just be present? Spiritual practices are a function of gratitude, and they're a function of being in the now, this present moment. Anything that you do that brings you to that is healing. And we need that healing every single day.
There was a follow-up clarification and then a couple more questions.
Okay.
Not sure if I understand if what is the Torah was answered. Is it the first 5 books of the Hebrew scriptures? The other is something more?
Thank you. Good question. The Torah technically, the word means teaching. The Torah technically is the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses. But when Jews speak of Torah, they don't speak of the 5 books of Moses. They don't even speak of the entire Hebrew Bible, which comprises 39 books. You have Joshua, I'm not going to list them all for you. I could, just saying I could. But but there are 39 books of the Torah, including the prophets and the writings. When Jews speak of Torah, as I said, we're talking about the Torah and the garden, the expanse around the Torah. All of the rabbinic literature, all of the commentaries, all of the continued Jewish legal codes. My teacher, Rabbi Harold Joyce, would say, we are not the people of the book, we are the people of the commentary. And if you open a traditional Jewish Torah book, we don't call it a Torah, we call it a Chumash, the 5, you'll notice that if you come to my synagogue, and you're all welcome to come to my synagogue anytime. Shabbos begins at 9:30, but the Jews show up at 10:30. So you can come anytime. You open up the book, you'll see that the Torah is actually a small part of it. It's mostly a bunch of commentary. And so when we talk about Torah, we're talking about the expanse of Jewish literature that stems from the Torah to this time.
And circling back to one question and then one other. Is there a particular author that influenced you?
Oh, sorry, yeah. Where do I begin? I have so many great teachers. I think that the author of the hour, and that has been the author of the hour, maybe now for a couple decades, is Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. I think that he was a philosopher. He was a sort of an anti-philosopher. He was a poetic philosopher, and he was deeply engaged in his own personal Hasidic background, which was very spiritual and very influenced by Jewish mysticism and the psychology of Jewish mysticism. But he also was a person that was in the secular world. He received a doctorate. He escaped Nazi Germany, came to America, worked in the seminaries which were non-Orthodox, even though he himself had an Orthodox upbringing. The people that straddle the worlds, the old world and the new world, are very important teachers in our age because they speak both languages of deep faith and spirituality, while yet reckoning with the modern issues of society and science. And so, if you look in the Jewish tradition, the three major ones are Abraham Joshua Heschel, Mordechai Kaplan, and Joseph Soloveitchik. Heschel was probably the best writer of the three, although he's hard for a lot of people. But those are the three I think that speak still to this day. I don't know that anybody has yet surpassed them. I have teachers of mine that I love, Elliot Dorff, who I mentioned, but I think those are the three that continue to evoke and speak to the challenges and the issues of the hour.
Two other questions, and we just have about 2 minutes, so. Want me to just put them both out?
Yeah, put them both out. Put them both out.
I'll just name both of them. One is, what happens after someone dies?
I had that question too. Thank you, whoever asked that. I was
I
wondering.
got 2 minutes.
Why don't you just go with that? Get the person to sit online real quick.
Sorry, to clarify the question, is what happens to the soul? Or is it like the body or Jewish burial rites, or is that you don't know? It's just
Why don't
whatever.
you answer both?
Okay, so on one foot, see, it's coming back to that over and over. On one foot. God, in the story of the Garden of Eden, created man out of the dust of the earth. Adam. Adamah is earth. The first human being is Adam, of the earth. Adam literally means that. And blew the breath of life, created a neshama, a soul. When we die, according to the tradition, the dust of the earth from which we were created goes back to the earth, and the soul goes back up to God. Everything in the Jewish tradition is about respecting that, respecting the body. So according to Jewish tradition, we wash the body. We guard the body. You never let the body alone, because the body should never be embarrassed. Nobody should embarrass, say anything, do anything to the body. You respect it. That's God's vessel. And you bury quickly, because the longer you leave a body out, the more opportunity for desecration, decay, dismissal. We bury within 3 days as Jews. And we say prayers, and we honor that soul's ascent into the next world. What the next world is, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. There is the concept of heaven, which is the Garden of Eden. Garden is an interesting concept because it's neither a wilderness nor like a parking lot. It's a combination. It's a joint effort. It is wild. It is created by God, but it is also curated by man. Paradise. Paradise is literally the Greek word for garden. So you go back to some sort of garden. You're in God's presence, whatever that is. There's also in Judaism the concept of reincarnation. In Hebrew, it's Gilgul and Neshamot, the rolling of the souls. And according to the Jewish tradition, there are several soul types. And those souls, essentially, your soul is like a diamond with many facets. And you come into earth and you have a spiritual curriculum, an educational curriculum. And you have to polish that side of your soul. And at some point, you will have fulfilled the integration of your soul with God's holy presence and will. Or it just continues forever. You're always on that process of the unification of God as a part of God's self. There is a concept of resurrection of the dead, which is less popular among the liberal streams of Judaism, including conservative Judaism, where I come from, which is that, eventually there's going to be the Messiah and that the perfection on earth is going to happen and you're going to need your body. And so you bury, you don't cremate. And so you're literally resurrected from the ground and you're going to live out on earth in this perfected world. And then there's just I don't know. There's agnosticism in the technical sense of it. We just don't know. And that's a legitimate ideology in Judaism. That's okay. those are the major streams. Yes, my wife had a question.
I'll ask you later. We're gonna get it.
All right, well, thank you, Rabbi Paul. This has been wonderful, so full of information, and you are really good at standing on one foot, let me tell you.
Okay, thank you.
Please join us next month for Getting to Know Your Neighbor's Faith, the third Wednesday of the month. You can come in person to First Presbyterian Church here in San Rafael or join us on Zoom. Our speaker will be Moina Shaikh, who comes from the Muslim tradition, so it will be very interesting. So hope you can join us and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.